Hello and welcome back to Mike's Maths. Thank you for joining us today. Today's lesson, as you can see, is about fractions, decimals and percentages, and in particular what you're going to be learning in today's lesson is how to convert fractions into decimals and into percentages. Okay, in fact it's converting one from another, so we'll be looking at all combinations, for example percentages into decimals, percentages into fractions, etc, etc. So conversion is the main focus of today's lesson, one thing into another. At Key Stage 3, this is considered to be between Level 4 and Level 6 work, and at GCSE or IGCSE level, if you're studying the new 9 to 1 program, then this is Level 2 or Level 3 work. Okay, so converting fractions to decimals to percentages. In the course of this lesson we are going to discuss several methods, but we're going to start really by talking about the meaning of fractions, decimals and percentages, because if we understand the meaning of them, often that can lead us to converting one into the other very easily. So for example, if we start off by talking about fractions, okay, if we're taking notes, this is our first heading, fractions. What does a fraction mean? Well, let's look at this fraction here, 2/5. Okay, 2/5. What does it mean? Well, basically there are two ways of thinking about it. First of all, it means 2 out of 5. Okay, 2 out of 5. This line, the division line, can mean out of. Okay, so 2/5 means 2 out of 5, but it can also mean 2 divided by 5. Okay, in other words, this line here can be thought of as divided by, and it's this idea that it means 2 divided by 5 that we're going to be most interested in today's lesson. Because if you take 2/5 and you treat it as 2 divided by 5, and if you did that on a calculator, for example, and you press the equals button, you would get 0.4. Okay, and already we can see therefore that we can convert a fraction, 2/5, into a decimal very, very easily. Okay, especially if you've got a calculator, because you just do the top number divided by the bottom number. Okay, so that's early thoughts on converting fractions into decimals, and we're going to come back to that a bit later in the lesson. What about decimals then? Okay, decimals. Alright, what about the meaning of decimals? Well, if we start off with a number line here, let's say at one end we start with the number 5, and then we go 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, 5.5, 5.6, 5.7, 5.8, 5.9, and here 6. Okay, so we're going from 5 at one end to 6 at the other end. We can see that between 5 and 6 we've split it into 10 equal jumps, haven't we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 10 jumps to get from 5 to 6, therefore each jump would be 1/10. Okay, which we can write this way, and as you can see, 1/10 is 0.1, because as we jump we're adding 0.1, 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, etc. So decimals, what do they mean? Well, this is one way of thinking about what they mean. 0.1 is the same as 1/10, and thinking of it that way, we can already convert 0.1, which is a decimal, into 1/10, which is a fraction. Okay, and if we think about the columns involved here, 0.2, okay, this is the units column, there are no units. This is the tenths column, so there are 2/10. So just an understanding of what this means, it really just means a 2 in the tenths column, which means 2/10. Well, we can write 2/10 that way, can't we? So can you see how an understanding of what a decimal actually means can help us to convert, in this case, a decimal into a fraction. Okay, if we got 0.12 as a decimal, what would this be as a fraction? Well, we can think about this as being a 1 in the tenths column. This is a 2 in the 100ths column, isn't it? Or we could think about this as being 12 100ths. Okay, now we can write that this way, 12 100ths. And can we simplify that? Well, yes, we can. What goes into 12 that also goes into 100? Actually, 4 goes into both. So divide by 4. 12 divided by 4 gives us 3. 100 divided by 4 gives us 25. Okay, so just by realizing that this decimal means 12 100ths, we're able to then write that as a fraction and then simplify it. Okay, so our conclusion is that 0.12 is 3 25ths. Okay, so this is how we would go from, as we said before, a decimal into a fraction. Okay, just to see whether you've got that or not, what about this number, 0.357? How would we convert that into a fraction? Well, have a think. If you want to pause, press the pause button. Whenever you're ready, press play. Okay, 0.357. What is that as a fraction? Well, let's kind of break it down. If it had been 0.3, just 0.3, that is a 3 in the tenths column, so that is 3 tenths. Okay, if it had just been 0.35, that's okay, 3 tenths and 5 100ths, or we could express that as 35 hundredths. Okay, and that we could simplify that to give us our fraction. But what we've got here, of course, is 0.357. So in actual fact, we could actually express this as 357 1,000ths. Okay, I'm going to leave that there, but if it was possible to simplify that, you would simplify it. So I hope you see the point. It's in theory, it's quite simple to go from a decimal to a fraction just by understanding what the decimal actually means. Okay, just to make sure you've got that, let's just do one final one. 0.24. What would that be, please, as a fraction? Okay, press pause. When you're ready, just press play. Okay, back again. 0.24. Well, if we consider that it's 24 100ths, we've already got a fraction, haven't we? We've already got a fraction. Can we simplify 24 over 100? Well, yes, you can. I mean, even if you spotted that you can divide both by 2, we would end up with that, but we can in fact divide by 2 again. 12 divided by 2 is 6, 50 divided by 2 is 25. Okay, so 0.24 is 6 25ths. Okay, and we got there just by considering what does the decimal mean. Alright, so that's enough on that. Let's take a look now at percentage. Okay, percentages. What do percentages mean? Does that help us in terms of conversion? Well, let's think about a nice simple percentage. Let's think about 20%. What does it mean? 20%, well, it means 20 per, or out of, 100. Okay, 20% means 20 out of 100. And we can already see, therefore, that to go from a percentage to a fraction is simple, because basically a percentage is already a fraction. Why? Because 20% means 20 out of 100. That is a fraction. Okay, of course you would again try and simplify it. What goes into 20 that also goes into 100? Well, there's plenty of numbers, but if you actually divide both by 20, 20 divided by 20 is 1, 100 divided by 20 is 5. So we can see that 20% is the same as 1/5. Okay, just by understanding what 20% actually meant. Okay, one for you to have a go at. Can you please change 36% into a fraction? Okay, again, press pause if you need to, and play when you're ready. Okay, 36% as a fraction. Well, it's already a fraction, isn't it? Because it means 36 out of 100. That is a fraction. Can I simplify? Well, they're both even numbers, so you could, if you can't spot a bigger number, just divide both by 2. 36 divided by 2 is 18. 100 divided by 2 is 50. And we can see that we can actually divide again by 2, and we end up with 9/25. Okay, so if you got that right, well done. Okay, so what I'm hoping that you're seeing already is that just by understanding what a fraction means, or what a decimal means, or in this case what a percentage means, can help us with our conversions. Okay. What we're going to do now is look at a few more bits and pieces that we need, though, to complete all the work here. So I'm going to draw a picture here, which is going to be a useful picture for you to remember. So again, if you're taking notes, I would make sure that you copy this. We're going to look at how we turn a fraction into a decimal, how we turn a decimal into a percentage, and how we turn a percentage back into a fraction. So we've got a kind of cycle going on here, okay, or a circle. Our fraction, let's begin with a fraction of 2/5 that we looked at earlier. Do you remember how we convert that into a decimal? To go this way, what does a fraction mean? Oh yes, it means 2 divided by 5. If we do that on a calculator, we get 0.4. Okay, so that's how we go from fraction to decimal. Okay, we haven't yet talked about how we go from a decimal to a percentage, but basically we multiply it by 100. Okay, again, we're going to talk about that a bit more in a few minutes. So that means we've got the 0.4 here. If we want to turn it into a percentage, we times it by 100. 0.4 times 100 is 40, so that would give you 40%. Okay, and then how do we go from the percent to the fraction? Well, we just did that, didn't we? We remember what 40% means, which is 40 out of 100, and then you simplify that to get to the 2/5. So we'll just write simplify here. Alright, so that's a picture or a cycle of what's going on to convert fractions into decimals and into percentages. Now we've got arrows going on here, so we've got direction. It is possible, of course, to go in the reverse direction. For example, can we go from a percent back to a decimal? Well, that's the kind of opposite of times 100. What's the opposite of times 100? That's right, you would divide by 100. Okay, so that's fairly straightforward, and we're going to refer to this picture now in quite a few times over the next few examples. So let's go back to, first of all, fractions into decimals. Okay, fractions into decimals. We've said that this, generally speaking, is quite easy. Let's use that as our first fraction. Can we convert that into a decimal? Well, yes, we can, just by remembering that you do 3 divided by 20 equals, and you could do that on a calculator, of course, 3 divided by 20, and we would get the answer 0.15. Okay, so that would be correct. Now, what happens though if you don't have a calculator? That's what we need to consider. If we don't have a calculator, how might we do it? Well, there are different ways of doing it. For example, if we were trying to convert 1/9 into a decimal, okay, without a calculator, we'd have to treat this as 1 divided by 9. Okay, remember that's what fractions mean, the top divided by the bottom. So this is literally 1 divided by 9. Okay, how many times does 9 go into 1? Well, it doesn't, so we know we're going to get a decimal number, so let's put some zeros in here and begin. Okay, how many times does 9 go into 1? 0, because it doesn't go in, but we have to carry forward the 1. Okay, how many times does 9 go into 10? Well, 1 9 is 9, remainder 1. How many times does 9 go into 10? 1, remainder 1.